Our problem is that for 7 years we've been telling folks what we're against and what we're opposed to, and then we've had 7 months to govern. And the best we can come up with is a skinny plan on 24 hours notice. We got to get better at telling people what we believe, why we believe it, and then persuading them that it's right for the country. We've had plenty of time to do it. We set unrealistic expectations, and then we never meet them, which leads to anger and frustration. It's a complicated issue, but it's always been. We've had 7 years to figure it out, and the best we came up with was something called skinny.
Right. And let me ask you, where do you go from here? I know it's just sinking in. It's only been about 6 hours. But should you just move on or go back?
No, we got to go back. It impacts 20% of the economy. It was a fundamental promise of the Trump campaign, and it desperately needs to be done. The Affordable Care Act is failing. If you're going to fail, though, fail doing what you really fundamentally believe. And the health care, I would propose changes that are transformational, and it's going to require persuading my fellow citizens, including some independents and Democrats, that this is best for the country. It's not going to be done with 24 hours notice and a bill that has the word skinny in it. So It's hard to persuade people. I get that. I used to have to do it for a living, and I'm married. So it's hard to persuade people.
He represents South Carolina's 4th District. He's also chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, serves on the House Committees on Intelligence, Ethics, and Judiciary, made news this week with Jared Kushner. We want to welcome back on our guest line to the Mike Gallagher Show, Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike, and I hope you are.
Well, I'm disappointed and I'm saddened. And, you know, I've got a story in front of me, and the timing of this is chilling. Story of a couple in New York City distraught over health care costs. Early this morning, jumped to their deaths from their apartment building. This was a man and a woman, both in their 50s, as described by the New York Post. The woman had a suicide note in her pocket, said, "Our kids are upstairs, please take care of them." The man had a suicide note in his pocket saying, "We both have medical issues. We just can't afford the health care." Now, this happened early this morning. Who knows if they're watching on C-SPAN, if they're aware of the Republicans' utter failure in the Senate. But the fact is, Congressman, there are plenty of Americans who are hurting, who are struggling, who are getting their backs broken by the costs, the rising costs of premiums. And this story of this double suicide here in New York City, according to the Post, over the cost of health care, just seems to put a face and a true human condition to what this country is experiencing under the onerous Obamacare.
Mike, I think you put your finger on it in your opening. It wasn't a Republican failure. I don't think the Democrats should delight. The Affordable Care Act is going to implode. And that's going to affect everyone, whether you have a political ideation or not. Right. It is unsustainable. The premiums are rising. The insurers are fleeing. The costs aren't coming down. I'm not an optimist by nature. In fact, the most I could muster this morning when I bumped into a colleague was at least we're not in North Korea. That's the best I could muster. Although, let me tell you this. There is something purifying about losing, and my frustration for 7 months now has been the Republican Party is pretty good at telling you what it does not like and what it opposes. This was our opportunity to both tell and persuade our fellow citizens what we believe and why we believe it. And I mean, let's don't kid ourselves. Early this morning, they were voting on something that had the word skinny in it. It was hardly transformational. Right. It didn't reflect the purported values that we claim to have. It was just a way to get us to conference, and even that failed. So if you're going to fail doing something you fundamentally believe that reflects conservative values, we've got to do much better at telling people what we believe, why we believe it, and then persuade them it's best for the country.
And if you don't mind, Congressman, explain for the uninitiated what that would have meant to take it to conference, because I've been explaining it all week. This would have been a vote to kick it to the House to continue a negotiation. The House has done extraordinary work and has fought hard. I'm reading here because as I'm mystified by Senator McCain's vote, I mean, my gosh, even his friend and our, my love and familiarity with South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham voted to go ahead and take this to conference. So he split with his good friend Senator McCain on this. Senator McCain was quoted as saying he didn't have enough assurances from the House that this wouldn't have become law. Was that a valid explanation? Is that legitimate?
Well, Mike, I can tell you that Speaker Ryan went to great pains last night to say that it will go to conference.
Right.
There were a number of GOP senators who were concerned that the House was just going to pass the skinny version and then go home.
Right.
So Paul went out of his way to say that we will conference this. And whatever ideological differences people may have with Paul Ryan, he is an honorable man, and if he told me something, I would bet everything I had that he was going to keep his word. So do you think
Senator McCain just didn't believe Paul Ryan's assurances?
I don't know. I don't know if they had conversations. I can tell Senator McCain this. If there's any member of the House that you could rely on to tell you the truth,
right,
that was going to keep his word, it would be Paul D. Ryan from Wisconsin.
Wow. Well, it's really tough. It's a tough day. We're going to have to dust ourselves off, and don't count President Trump out. Don't count out the tenacity of Republicans who are going to continue to fight to do the right thing for the American people, despite the 3 Republicans last night or early this morning who voted against the American people and who betrayed this country. Congressman, the tough part for me are all those votes over the last 7 years where they had no problem voting yes. That's when you know you've got a president who's going to veto it. But now you have a president and a willing and enthusiastic House of Representatives to get this done. There's no way to explain this. There's no way to defend this.
But my point is, it is reflective of a broader underlying pathology,
right,
which is that people in politics overpromise, underperform, will say something in a 30-second soundbite on a stage somewhere,
right,
and then when, God forbid, you actually win the White House and the Senate, you have set expectations that you do not meet, which leads to the anger and the frustration that is palpable across our country. I would rather you promise me nothing and then exceed that nothingness than
right,
promise me you're going to do X, Y, and Z and miserably fail to do
right,
it.
Right. And there's also another way to put it. There's been a lot of damage done from this vote, a lot of confidence shattered on the part of the American people, and we're going to have a lot of work to do. Congressman, let's get into an area that, of course, you're so good at. I just read a piece by Ed Rogers, who, of course, was a veteran of the Reagan and George H.W. Bush White Houses. He wrote a piece in the Washington Post about how Jared Kushner's meeting with investigators, and Jared Kushner, who said his actions were proper during the presidential campaign, he points out, Ed Rogers does, that while everyone is fixated on all that's going on right now with Sessions and healthcare and everything, the fact of the matter is the media has been trying to sneak away from the Russian collusion story for all the breathless hype, the on-air furrowed brows and all of that. The truth of the matter is the collusion that they had counted on just isn't coming together. It isn't there.
Yeah, Jared Kushner answered every question that was posed to him. The Democrats ran out of good questions long before they ran out of questions, but he stayed. These are the major takeaways. He had a handshake with a Russian ambassador. He could not remember the name of the Russian ambassador the morning of November the 9th. How in the world do you collude with someone whose name you cannot recall the day after the election?
Right.
Literally, there's an email. I mean, you don't have to take his word for it. There's an email on November the 9th where he's asking, what's the name of the Russian ambassador? That meeting at Trump Tower where Kushner said, look, it was my brother-in-law. I felt like I should go. When I got there, I realized this is a waste of time. They're 2 separate emails where he emailed his aides and said, please get me out of here.
Right.
He was a phenomenal witness. His testimony is corroborated. And to your point, the collusion story, if there is an evidentiary basis for it, and I'm not prejudging because we still have witnesses to examine, but of the witnesses we've examined thus far, that's why you see them pivoting towards Comey and obstruction. And frankly, Adam Schiff's campaign for the United States Senate in California has taken a hit because he's been living off of the collusion story.
And has just come out looking really, I'm sorry to name call, but like a buffoon. I mean, no one sits around and accuses Trey Gowdy of being anybody's lackey. Everyone in Washington and certainly in South Carolina knows how tough you are, how fair you are, how impartial you are. And yet this guy, Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the committee, told reporters that Trey Gowdy took the role as a second attorney for Jared Kushner. I was very appreciative of Tom Rooney's response, the Republican from Florida, who said, I can't say the word, but I'll use the initials HS, because you know what? I'm sorry, Congressman, that's a load of HS.
Yeah, Rooney was about 2 feet away from me during that entire interview, so he was uniquely well positioned. Frankly, Mike, I ask more collusion questions of Jared Kushner than Adam Schiff did. Mm-hmm. I can't wait for the transcript to come out.
Yeah, right.
I pressed him more on the issue of collusion
than the chairman,
the Democrats did.
Or the highest ranking member. That's good. That's great. That's great. I mean, but this guy is a cable news darling. He loves to go on TV and bash and bash and bash. This is the problem. This is what everybody hates about politics. You get a fair-minded, tough former prosecutor like Trey Gowdy in there trying to get to the truth, and then a clown like this comes along and says, look at Trey Gowdy. He's the second attorney for Jared Kushner. All that's to do is to smear. There's no truth to that.
Well, he tried, but as my dad says, my son's a trial lawyer and he's in politics, so he's hard to smear.
There's that.
Is what's really frustrating to me about Adam. Adam is smart. Adam knows exactly what he's doing.
No, he's not.
I'm sorry. For 6 years, he couldn't think of a single good question to ask anyone in the Obama administration. Couldn't think of one.
Right.
At least provide oversight from a branch standpoint, from a legislative branch standpoint. I can't wait for the transcript to come out. For you to see Republicans asking more collusion questions of Jared Kushner than Adam Schiff should tell you all you need to know about his motive.
That's because the whole narrative is collapsing before our eyes, and they know it. Final question here, Congressman. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, wrote a letter to Dan Coats, the director of national intelligence, accusing top political aides of President Obama of making hundreds of requests during the 2016 presidential campaign to unmask the names of Americans in intelligence reports. And I know this won't exactly lead the NBC Nightly News or ABC, or it won't be much on CNN, but this is problematic, is it not?
It should lead all of them, Mike. For this reason, we have some surveillance programs that are up for reauthorization this fall. And these surveillance programs are a kind of a tacit agreement between the American people and their government. We're going to give you special powers, but you're going to safeguard how you use them. Mm-hmm. And if there is the unmasking of U.S. citizens for non-intelligence purposes, in other words, for political purposes, then that tacit agreement has been broken, and you will not have those programs reauthorized, and you will be at greater risk. So that's what frustrates me. If you need to unmask a U.S. citizen's name, it better be for a really good intelligence-related reason, and you better tell me what that reason is, or you're not going to have these programs reauthorized.
I say this to just about every guest I admire and respect, but I don't think I've ever meant it with any more ferocity than today. Congressman Gowdy, please keep fighting the good fight. We need your voice, and I'm always grateful for your time here on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Thank you, Mike. God bless you.
God bless you. Congressman Trey Gowdy joining us. Your reaction coming up, 800-655-Mike.